Dementia or Alzheimer's disease is a disease of midlife. And so it generally starts in our 30s. It starts in our 30s, but the first symptoms show up in our late 60s, 70s, and beyond. Our brain fully develops at around 25 years old, 25 to 30. And after that, that's when if we don't take care of our brain, we start getting a decline in these functions. Now, let's go back to the brain. The brain is 87 billion neurons, around 5 to 10,000 connections per neuron. My favorite area of the brain is the cerebellum, and the Purkinje cells inside the cerebellum have upwards of 50,000 connections per cell. So tightly dense, and there's so much happening. It takes 20% of the total calories that you consume every day to power this thing. And it's the most vascular rich organ in the entire body. Over time, through things such as sleep deprivation, poor diet, lack of physical activity, environmental toxins, this slowly erodes at the functioning of the brain. And over time, this starts to compound because that's what biology is. Everything is compounding. One night of sleep deprivation raises your risk of amyloid beta, which is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease pathology, by 4%. That's just one night of sleep deprivation. Imagine a new mother or a shift worker or a physician in their residency getting countless nights of sleep deprivation day in and day out. Imagine all of that compounding. And what happens? Well, we end up with either neuronal loss, which is like the complete atrophy of certain parts of the brain. And that's what is mild cognitive impairment. Mild cognitive impairment is a pre-dementia. In fact, there was a really wonderful study that just came out that I just read about, and they found that those who preserved cognitive capacity at 75 years old were handwriting and reading. So handwriting and reading preserves cognitive functions. Exercise is one of the most potent stimulus for brain health and Alzheimer's disease prevention and cognitive reserve. The more you exercise, the bigger your brain is. You are relying on short dopamine hits. Every time you scroll, you're sending signals to your brain that you're getting a dopamine hit, and your brain gets used to it. Remember, your brain is only there for two things: survival and reproduction. So every time that you stress your brain in the smallest amount of times, you're giving it dopamine hits. It doesn't allow us to do other things for a sustained period of time, like focus, read, have a conversation for the brain. And it's so sad because around 80% of the US population don't exercise for at least 30 minutes a week, which is actually quite scary. The physical activity guidelines are 150 minutes to 300 minutes of moderate to rigorous physical activity per week. The SMART trial, where they took a group of people with mild cognitive impairment and gave them 2 to 3 times per week of resistance training. And they not only preserved their cognitive functions, they enhanced their processing speed, they enhanced their fluid intelligence, and they had slowing of the gray matter. Minutes a day of aerobic physical activity can downregulate 13 types of cancers. And the most prominent ones being breast cancer, colon cancer, and prostate cancer. So these 3 have been studied most, and you get your anti-cancer effects from the myokine release. So quite specifically, when we exercise, we're getting a robust release of something called natural killer cells. And when we get these natural killer cells into the plasma and into the bloodstream, they go into the tumor site and they do what they were born to do. They kill. So they go into the tumor site and they start to kill the tumor. And this is where you get your anti-cancer effects of it. But you can also get it from the anti-inflammatory effects of resistance training, anti-inflammatory effects of aerobic training. So these myokines are really powerful. In fact, pharmaceuticals are spending billions of dollars trying to replicate these myokines in a bottle, and they can't do it. I want both men and women lifting heavy because you've got areas in your brain right across here lives your motor cortex. Think of your brain as real estate. There's real estate in your brain reserved for lifting heavy. So every time you lift a heavy weight as opposed to a lightweight. It takes more neural real estate to lift that heavy weight. So the heavier you lift, the greater the neural drive, the greater amyloid. In fact, amyloid is an antimicrobial peptide. So amyloid is actually a good thing. Amyloid beta is a good thing because it protects the brain cells. Now, here's what happens. We have this beautiful process during sleep that occurs. When we get into deep sleep, we activate the glymphatic system. Okay, so the glymphatic system comes from the word glial cells. We have glial cells in the brain. They sit outside of the neurons, and this is what is responsible for immunity. They're a chief immune response cell. During deep sleep, they shrink. And when they shrink, all of this amyloid beta that's floating around in the cerebral spinal fluid gets washed out. So it's like a washing machine that occurs in your brain, right? But what tends to happen in Alzheimer's patients is they don't get a chance to wash out the amyloid. What happens in perimenopause and menopause due to the hot flashes, you don't get into deep sleep because you're having a fragmented sleep because you're waking up due to hot flashes and night sweats. So that is what's causing the buildup of amyloid. Now stick with me. We've got another protein that is a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. It's tau protein, and tau lives in the axon of the cell, the one that I said is covered in the myelin sheath. And what happens under times of stress? What happens is this tau protein phosphorylates. So it breaks off, and basically tau protein stabilizes the microtubules. Okay, imagine these railroad tracks in the axon. Okay, just going